Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about really creating engaging, interactive, dynamic training that people actually want to attend, right? So we don't create training in the hopes that nobody shows up. We really want training that people not only show up to, but they engage with, they learn something, they take it away, they go and apply it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll introduce you in a moment to our guests, but first I'll just introduce myself. We'll go over some brief housekeeping. My name is Shannon Howard. I'm the Director of Customer and Content Marketing at Intellum. And every month we host these webinars just to talk about what's happening in the world of education, what can we learn from each other, and we're profiling, featuring experts in the industry, people who are doing the thing to share what they've learned and what can we take away from that. So today we're going to be learning about creating that dynamic and engaging training, especially in a field that is fast-paced, fast-moving, where maybe you're not always a SME, right? Sometimes we're creating content, we're creating curriculum, and we're not always the person who knows everything about that. So how do you engage busy SMEs in a fast-paced industry? And we'll go kind of behind the scenes what you of Digital is doing. Housekeeping wise, this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to come back to it, you want to take notes, share it with a friend, you'll get a copy in your inbox after the webinar is over. If you need closed captions, you can find those at the bottom of your screen. So we are back on Zoom, and Zoom has built in, yes, I know, like shoulder shimmy time. So Zoom, you have access to closed captions. The chat is also open. You can chat with everybody else in the call. So take a moment, let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, what you do, what you want to learn, however you want to introduce yourself. We would love to hear from you. Also, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you're going to see the Q&A box. So Veronica and Miles are going to be taking questions as we go. So if as they're talking, you have a question that comes up, go ahead and put it in that Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring that during the presentation to see if there's any questions that come up and kind of answer them in line with what they're talking about. And then our final thing is at the end of the webinar, you're going to get a survey. It's going to pop up, after you close out the Zoom. Please take a moment to fill that out. That's how we get better, right? We all know this as education professionals and trainers, that feedback is really critical to know, did we do a good job? Did we teach you what you wanted to know? Did we meet expectations? Also, what do you want to learn about in the future? And we read all that feedback. So thank you for being here today. I'm going to turn it over to Veronica and Miles from U of Digital. They're both going to introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Hey, everybody. Thank you all very much for joining. I see you all trickling in here. Everybody's melting. I'm sorry. I'm in my nice air-conditioned house, so I don't know if when I go outside, maybe I'll melt. My name's Miles. I'm in Portland, Oregon. It is also warm here. I am the Chief Growth Officer at U of Digital. I'm going to tell you a little bit about U of Digital in a second. A little bit about my background. I have always worked in, marketing and advertising. I've done a little bit of everything at this point. Started out my career on the client side, moved on to being an ad tech founder, did that for a good long while. Then I was in the agency consulting world, most recently at Media Monks for a total of 5 years. And then I've been at U of Digital now for about 2.5 years. And please, if you have any questions or anything you want to chat about after this webinar, email me. I'm miles@uof.digital. Would love to hear from you. And I'm going to let Veronica introduce herself, and then I'll be back to tell you a little bit more about our company.
You're so kind, Miles. Wow. Hi, y'all. I'm Veronica. Most people call me V. I am based in upstate New York, as I mentioned in the chat. And yes, we are all melting. In upstate New York, we do not know how to do heat. I will tell you that right now. I spent most of my adult life in New York. I also come from an advertising and marketing background. I was agency side for about 6 years, and then I was doing training and marketing and tech and all this fun stuff. I've worked with a ton of different brands, a ton of different publishers, few social platforms. I lead learning experience at U of Digital, and I am more than aware that it's not a super common title. So the reason that we have a learning experience department at U of Digital is that we find that doing good training is really hard. And so the part of learning experience is really thinking about the entire experience from start to finish with our clients. So from onboarding to their actual workshops to their e-learnings, how does everything fit together? What's working? What's not? How do we make it better? I think about that constantly. It keeps me up at night. So, as you can probably tell, I love to chat all things training. So, my email is there. I have a last name on my email because I'm fancy like that, veronica.ripson@uof.digital. And so, in terms of, yeah, go New York, go ad agencies, what's up, represent. So, in terms of what the session is station, and thank you for setting us up so well. So, Miles is going to talk in a second about what UF Digital actually is. We're really building the anticipation. But today we're going to be covering a couple things. So, first off, we want to talk about what expert led training is and how we think about it. And then we're going to introduce a framework that we use, kind of the 4 steps to an awesome expert led training. I'll walk you through that. And then we're going to intersperse some tips and tricks to create these awesome learning experiences. So, I do want to note a couple things. It's not a deep dive into learning models. Shannon, I'm going to steal your thunder. I know there's a Kirkpatrick model session next month. Is not that. We're not deep diving on that. It is also not a how-to guide. I acknowledge that all verticals are different. There are people on the call that probably come from totally different backgrounds from us. So this is not a like how-to guide. This is a more how we do it and what you can apply. And as I said, it's not one size fits all. Every company, every approach is going to be different. We just want to share kind of our approach and our tips and tricks, and hopefully you can take at least 1 or 2 things from it. So, in terms of we prepped it enough. Who is U of Digital, Miles?
All right, all right. Yeah, for those of you who actually, I would love to know in the chat if anybody on the webinar has heard of U of Digital or worked with us in the past. That would be amazing. I'm curious whether anybody in this crowd has heard of us at all. We're a big deal in ad tech, L&D. Anyway, no, we're a specialist training and enablement partner for the digital marketing and advertising industry at large. Oh, thank you, Helen. We are lucky to work with some amazing companies, brands, teams in the space. We work with a broad range of company types. So we work with brands, we work with tech platforms, we work with agencies. And when we run training and enablement and education programs, we take a very multi-medium approach. So the thing we're going to talk about most today, these bullet points on the right, is our interactive classroom style workshops. And those are expert led. And Veronica is going to go deep on kind of how we build the expertise into those workshops. And we draw upon that expertise from the U of Digital Expert Network, which at this point numbers well over 300. Veronica would know a more precise number than I. We also supplement that with engaging and fun e-learning courses, which are available on our platform at learn.uf.digital, which is Intellum. So we run our education platform on Intellum. That kind of is what ties us into the Intellum universe and why we're so excited to be doing this with Intellum. We also have a weekly newsletter that is read by 16,000 people in the industry. It's very popular. People love it. And lastly, we run certifications, and our certifications are very widely recognized in the digital marketing and advertising space. Veronica, you can take me to the next slide here.
I love how you're talking about Intellum like it's the Marvel multiverse of like we are part of the multiverse. We're in it.
We're in their multiverse, they're in ours. Everything is integrated
Just...
all the ways. All right, so a little bit more about where we sit in kind of the learning world, specifically in the marketing and advertising world. So we see ourselves as sitting between kind of like an uppermost layer of generalized learning platforms like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, things like this that are great for soft skills, basic concepts, but they typically don't go very deep on kind of industry savvy. And then there's very, very tactical learning platforms like, Google Skillshop or Salesforce Trailhead that are very, very specific about platforms and tool sets and are highly tactical, and they don't generally offer a ton of business context. And so we sit in between those two things. We serve learners who are trying to achieve pretty specific commercial and business outcomes. We provide a ton of context about what's going on in the industry and with competitors and things like that. And then also our trainings are designed by and for industry professionals. So we are working with, typically a lot of enterprises. We're working with career professionals. We're not like an SMB type of platform. So actually, Veronica, you can take me to the next slide. So that's a little bit about where we sit kind of in the training universe. And our relationship with in-house L&D teams. So we're typically partnering with in-house L&D teams, and we help augment them. And we bring in a lot of strategic and outward-looking perspective that internal teams, typically need a bit of help developing, because that's hard to develop inside your own four walls. And so Veronica, again, is going to talk a lot about how expertise and the nature of expertise figures into this when we are working with L&D teams to help bring this strategic perspective to their learners. Veronica, I think I have one more slide. Yes. Maybe actually there is one more after this. Sorry. So also, we love memes. We really love memes. I'm not sure we put enough in this deck. So here's like 3 memes on one slide. We jam these into our weekly newsletter every week, or if you follow us on social, you can enjoy our memes. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, go to newsletter.uf.digital. It's free, comes out every week. People love it. And you get to see Tom Cruise as TikTok hanging onto the plane, which is the United States trying to kick him out. That's one of my favorites.
I can't believe you almost forgot the meme slide. It's like your favorite slide,
It,
Miles.
it is, it is, it is, it is. Anyway, all right, my last plug here. Everybody on this webinar, we are extending a 25% discount to all of you. So that's 5 percentage points in addition to the early bird discount that we're offering. Use code Intellum to save 25% on our new AI Accelerator workshop series. This is a series of 4 workshops plus a certification. We're running it right now. I've been attending all of them. It's amazing. It's just a fantastic primer on AI for anybody who is in the digital marketing and advertising space. Again, if you're at a brand, you're at a tech platform, you're at an agency, you're at a consultancy, wherever you are, this is a fantastic course. If you want to know any more about it, like shoot me an email. Happy to tell you more about it, but go to uof.digital/AI to learn more and sign up. Anyway, and with that, I will hand it over to Veronica. And it occurred to me, Veronica, this is an expert-led training, and you are the expert.
The pressure. No, no, thanks, Miles. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks
everyone.
for springing that on me. No, so a couple things I want to say before we get into the content. So one thing I do want to mention here is that when we think about trainings, as Miles said, we're in a specific niche. And so I know some people on the call, you are potentially doing more generalized training. Some people are probably doing in-house training. And so as we go through this, I definitely encourage you to ask us questions, throw it in the chat. I run a lot of our workshops myself. I have the chat open. I will be checking it as well as QA. Don't worry, I can do both at the same time. We would love to have a discussion about this. And the AI Accelerator, I got to say, it's really fun. Miles and I have been in every session. We've been having a blast hearing the conversation. So with that, I'm going to start with a very garish slide to wake everyone up, which is great training is human. Miles specifically was like, I want it to be garish. So here you go. In all seriousness, though, so one of the mantras that we end up saying a lot is great training is human at UF Digital. And there's a couple reasons for that. So when we think of learners, we think of them as humans. When we talk to SMEs, we think of them as humans. And part of this comes from my marketing background. For anyone on the call in marketing, we talk about like consumers and customers and personas, right? And one of the things we often lose is that people are just human. And so when we talk about training, we are often so focused on great training being human. So how can we make humans want to learn, and how can we make it exciting for them? And so my role sits across operations and hiring and content and all the things that come into this. So the first thing I want to touch on is, what is an expert-led training, right? Let's start there. So when we think of this, and this is our perspective, so we think of kind of 2 different buckets, and we'll dive into this more in a bit. So we think of like standard trainings as the what, right? So what do we want to know? Whereas with expert-led trainings, we're often thinking about the why, as Miles said. So that external perspective of why are things the way they are, or why is a certain thing in our industry taking off? And I'll talk a little bit more about this with an example in a second. But oftentimes in the ad tech and marketing industry, we get excited about things things, like new things. We're like, wow, this is so cool. And so with the standard training, you might talk about what that thing is. Whereas with expert-led training, we contextualize that often. So why is it so exciting? Why are we pumped? Is it that someone said we should be, or is it actually exciting? We like to dive into that a lot. In terms of, yeah, we're giant geeks. Absolutely, Miles, spot on. So, in terms of our source of knowledge, with standard trainings, that is often someone who is really in a specific area, a specific product. So, the source of knowledge comes from product and workflow documentation, instructional content, and past trainings. Whereas, oftentimes with expert led training, we're focusing on the experience of the expert. So, what do you know? What do you see? What is your experience? And we derive a lot from that, which we'll talk about. Now, just to be clear, there's advantages to both. So for standard trainings, they're highly repeatable and scalable. I was in enablement for a social platform for a little while, and it's great to be able to like take a training, do it. Take a training, do it. Love to be scalable. It's one of our goals at U of Digital all the time is how do we scale this? It's run by professional instructors. So oftentimes these are people that work for specific companies as trainers. And the outcome and impact is more measurable. So that's great, right? We love our KPIs. We love being able to measure the top of our pyramid. Great, great, great. Awesome. With expert led trainings, the trainings can often be highly interactive. We can have more conversations. We handle curveballs and edge cases. I cannot tell you the amount of sessions we have where we're like halfway through the deck and we get into a great conversation for 20 minutes that's super relevant to the group. So we say, okay, let's do it. And that's because we have that expert that has that experience. It's like, yeah, sure, let's chat about it. It's my life, right? And oftentimes they're seen as a subject matter authority, right? They are in the weeds, they are doing it on the day to day. And as Miles mentioned, all of our experts and our expert network are practitioners. They are not full time employees of ours. They are doing their own thing, whether that be sitting at an agency, sitting at a consultancy, sitting at a brand, a publisher, whomever. They are all dealing with this on the day to day. And that becomes so, so helpful when we get questions about hard stuff, right? Like, I can't do this thing, it's stressing me out. Me too, right? So we really are able to have that experience. And then with standard trainings, they are often narrow and highly specific, and that is what allows them to be repeatable and scalable, right? And it can be hard with more standard trainings to really connect it to the outside world, right? We're very narrowly focused on one thing. Whereas with expert led trainings, that's our goal. We really want to take that expert experience and connect it to what people are experiencing in their day to day. And again, this can be topic based, this can be perspective based. We'll talk about that, but we'll talk about how we think about our trainings. I'm excited. But in all seriousness, though, like we really just try to contextualize everything. And again, I know we have some ad tech people on the call, some marketing people on the call. You know that our industry is changing every day. And so our goal is really like, why is it changing? What's going on? And so as I mentioned, we have kind of 4 steps here that we're going to walk through to develop excellent expert-led trainings. So we start with genuine needs, right? What do people actually need? We're going to talk about that. Best approach. So, what type of training do they need? We have a couple different types of training that we do. And what is the best type of expert? How do we deliver the best delivery? I just said delivery. Everyone can laugh on the side. That's cool. And then, of course, we want to learn what worked and what didn't. So, we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to walk through each of these, starting with genuine needs. So, when we have a new client, we do intakes. And we do a couple things with that. So we do quantitative intake through surveys, through assessments. We also do qualitative intake where we chat with people that are there. And we often focus on kind of different levels as well. So we like to speak to really senior people. We like to talk to people just starting out. We like to speak to mid-level as well to hopefully get that like full 360 experience, especially because we know that like different levels and different roles are having different challenges, right? So we really try to dive into that. And so in terms of how we do this, we think of it as kind of a Venn diagram. Everybody loves a good Venn diagram, right? So we have quantitative and qualitative. So from the quantitative perspective, we run a survey, we send a survey to everyone that we will potentially be teaching, educating, and we ask them, you know, what topics are you interested in? What topics are you not interested in? How confident do you feel in these topics? So for instance, with digital measurement, let's say, we'll ask people like, how confident do you feel explaining X or Y in digital measurement? And it's very interesting sometimes because people on a scale of 1 to 5 will say, I am a 5. I am so confident, but then they'll say it's the number one thing they want to learn more about. Right. And that's a great insight for us of like, oh, you already know a lot about this and you feel great about it, but you feel like there's more to go on, right? And then we also look at an assessment. So we do a pre-assessment and post-assessment with each of our clients through their contract period. So we'll run an assessment. And again, what's interesting sometimes is what people say they're interested in, what people say they're confident in, and then what the assessment says are all three totally different things. So we have to triangulate that quantitative. Sometimes it all works out, but sometimes it does not. And then from a qualitative perspective, in that survey, in addition to asking about topics and confidence and all those fun, measurable quantitative things, one of the things we found is incredibly helpful is to ask people, to you, what makes a good training? That's it. To you, what makes a good training? And my friends, I have gotten paragraphs sometimes. I have gotten like horror stories. I have gotten like, this was my favorite thing I've ever experienced in my life. I've gotten, please don't be boring so many times, right? So, like, it's a really good open ended question. And people don't just answer the question, they really dive into like what they want from training. And that can be so, so helpful for us. And then when we do our intake interviews, again, these are about 30 minutes with all different levels at a company. We ask them about their needs. We do interviews as well. We're going to talk more about really how we approach that in a second here because it's not necessarily, I would say, standard operating procedure. But when we put all of this together, that's where the magic happens, right? And again, humans, as we talked about, are complicated. So this won't always fit together perfectly, but it gives us a really like round view of everything that's going on. And so when we get into these intake interviews, again, remember they're about a half hour. We have never met the people we are interviewing, right? These are all SMEs at a specific company that is not ours. And so I wanted to share some tips with this because I am sure many of you on the call, when you have to go to a SME, even at your own company, you're like, oh, I've never met this person, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity there to really dive in. So spotlight on intake interviews, everyone. So first off, know who you're speaking to, but question your assumptions. So we all probably do a little like LinkedIn searching before we chat with someone, right? And especially if it's external, you're like, okay, what's their role? Like, how long have they been there? That sort of thing. But we, as you can probably tell, love to contextualize. So I also look at their background as well. Like, oh, do we have anywhere in common? Did you work on anything really interesting that I can ask you about? For instance, I worked on a cat litter brand once, organic cat litter. Shout out Shannon's cat. And so I worked on an organic cat litter brand, and I saw someone else worked on a competitor years ago. And I was like, wait, you were my competitor. And that's how we started the conversation. And that really allows people, they forget, they actually remember to be human. They take that veil off and they're like, oh my gosh, wait, you worked on organic cat litter too? What? Right? So that's the first part, right? Is contextualize their background, but also question your assumptions. So when I came into this role, I come from a buyer perspective. I've worked with a couple different sales orgs, but I mostly sat on the buy side. And so my assumption was, I'm going to be honest, my assumption was like, sellers sell. That's what they do, they sell. And I've learned so, so, so much by questioning those assumptions and being like, oh, different orgs do it totally differently. Different sales teams do it totally differently. So it's not just like, oh, they're a seller, they sell. It could be something totally bigger than that, or it could be they sell to like one specific client because it's a really big client. So really important to question those assumptions. I'm going to come back to bullet two. I'm going to skip that for now. In terms of starting the conversation, so I already mentioned like contextualize. If you can start with something human, do it. Oh my gosh. We come into these conversations putting on our business hats oftentimes. Like, this is my role. This is what I do. I'm going to talk about business. But if we can get people to kind of get more comfortable, oftentimes that's where the magic happens. So, as I mentioned, a lot of these conversations, I am meeting people for the first time. So, the first thing I say is like, hi, I'm Veronica. I work at U of Digital. Do you know why you're here? Not even kidding. I say that pretty often. And a lot of times people are like, it's on my calendar. That's why I'm here. I'm like, okay, so let's contextualize what we're trying to do here, right? And so again, if you are internal and you're working at a large org, sometimes that happens, right? It's just on someone's calendar and they're like, oh, I'll go. I'm supposed to be there. So make sure that people have that context, establish what you're looking to get out of the conversation. So I always say like, hey, we're doing a training program. I just want to learn more about what's going on in your world. And I also put guardrails in place. So, like, anything you say to me, I will never attribute back to you. No one will ever know that you said XYZ. Next is lead with open dialogue, right? So we all know we want to ask open-ended questions, right? We all know those are more helpful. We've all heard it a million times. But oftentimes people don't necessarily know like what you are looking for, and you can't always say it, right? So we can't always say like, do you need training on this? I would love to, right? I would love to ask that and have someone be like, yes, I do. I would love that. It'd be awesome. But here's the thing about that. Humans rarely say they need specific training on specific topics. They just don't. They just don't, right? If you ask someone, do you need training on digital measurement? They'll say, I mean, yeah, sure, I guess, right? People don't think that way. They're humans, right? And so when we think about what we want to get from these intake interviews, it's more about getting like a slice of life and understanding what people's real challenges are. Not just what we've been briefed on, not just what we think they are, not the company challenge, but these specific people, because that gives us a really, really good piece of intel. Now, the other thing here, little pro tip, humans rarely say they need specific training. However, they will tell you other people need training. So that's a really good opportunity too. So sometimes I'll say something like, "Well, what do you think like your team would benefit from?" Or if we're talking about a different team, say I'm talking to a sales team and we're talking about account management, I might say, "Oh, that sounds hard. What do you think account management needs for training?" And then people will have a big list of all the things that they wish other people knew. And so again, people aren't going to necessarily tell you up front, I wish they would. I'm not devious. I'm trying to help, Miles. In all seriousness, though, like people won't tell you right away what they need. And so going back to bullet two, I'm not going to go back to the slide because I think this is a good impact slide. Going back to this conversation of how we get this out. So we have kind of a standard set of questions we like to ask, but more often than not, I let people lead me where they want to go. So I will start with like, here's who I am, here's what I'm looking to find out. Tell me about yourself, right? And then I let people go where they want to. So sometimes I learn a lot about their like day-to-day problems. Sometimes I learn about a very specific thing that's driving them wild. Sometimes I learn they're just like tired and worried training is going to take time out of their day. Great, good to know. These are all really important pieces of information. So again, takeaways. One, have a script, but you don't need to stick to it. You don't have to. Let people guide you to where they want to go. And two, people are rarely going to say that they want specific training. So find ways around that, whether that be what does your team need? What do other teams need? That sort of thing. So once we do intake, we've got some quant, we've got some qual, we have a plan, we're feeling good about it, we've got sign off, everything's awesome. Now we need to plan the darn thing. So when we think about training, we have four different training types that we kind of use. And so we think about these in types of training and also types of experts. So I'm going to start with types of training. So we have four different types of training that we do. So one is explainer trainings. So these are specific products, topics, that sort of thing. So how does brand lift measurement work? What are data clean rooms? How are data clean rooms used in the industry? These are very specific topics, knowledge, takeaways, that sort of thing. Then we have our second ones, which are trends and zeitgeist. These are very fun. So these are about kind of like broad industry trends, strategic perspectives. One of our most popular ones is like ad tech trends. And we have to update that. Again, I do this. I have to update this every month because it is constantly changing. And so we have, we'll have a client finish out their contract with an ad tech trends in 2024, and then we do another one in 2025, and they're completely different. And again, it's really helpful to contextualize like, why is all of this happening? And then we get into competitive sessions. So we are not by any means a competitive specialist company. And I like to make that clear because there are some out there. Our view is really we bring in experts who are using competitive platforms or tools, and they compare and contrast. They talk about what they see, what their experience is, all these sorts of things. So it could be something like an enterprise CRM, customer relationship management competitive landscape. For those of you not in our industry, we have too many acronyms. I will try to define them as I go. And the last one that we have is perspective. So these are really fun, and I find these are really valuable. So We will have someone come in that sits in a specific role or in a specific vertical and talk about their perspective. So, for instance, we did one recently around how CMOs think about marketing measurement. So, measurement, as you can probably tell from my talk track so far, is a really big conversation in our industry. And it varies so much by level, it varies so much by industry, so much by vertical. And so, having that perspective, if you were looking for like a specific type of thing, can be so valuable because if you try to read up on it, it's like, well, it's different in auto than it is in pharma, than it is in consumer packaged goods. And now I don't even know what I'm looking at. So that perspective can really help ground people. Now, these are our training types, and every company is going to be different. But I'm going to introduce the matrix that we think of our trainings on in a second. I see a great question in chat, so I'm going to take it. Should an ideal training combine an element of all, but vary in weight based on goal? Potentially. So our trainings are generally 60 to 90 minutes and they're remote. So we try to stick to generally like one type of training. However, for instance, with like perspective sessions, we'll sometimes bring in some competitive elements as well, right? So here's what competitive look like up front, and then we're going to spend the next 40 to 60 minutes talking about my perspective on that. We also sometimes combine explainers with competitive. So as an example, if we're looking at a specific type of tech, we might spend the first 15 to 20 minutes talking about what makes each type of tech unique before diving into, okay, so now that we know what makes a specific type of tech unique, now we're going to talk about how people compete in that and how they sell on that. Miles, anything,
Um,
Miles, you up mute?
Yeah, just one thing to add to that is if you replace the word training there with curriculum, then
Mm,
yes, we absolutely combine these training types. We tend to act as a long-term training partner for our clients, and so we are often putting together, 12-month curriculum-based plans and roadmaps for teams and companies that would combine elements of all of these training types in varying weights depending on what it is the client needs to accomplish, what their needs are. But anyway, I just wanted to make
no,
that
it's a
little
great call
point.
out for sure.
Back to you,
And
Veronica.
like we often find, so for instance, when we build out these training plans, like we'll definitely have some explainers in there because oftentimes, and I've seen this, I have made this mistake, I have learned my lesson. If we start with just a perspective session, like how CMOs think about marketing measurement, but we haven't done an explainer session, right? On like how marketing measurement works. It's like, okay, thanks for telling me, but I don't really know what we're talking about. So we'll definitely combine those in a whole training plan. That's a great call out, Miles. Um, do you only consider an expert someone not employed by the company? Not necessarily, but mostly. Miles can nerd out about adtech, martech, and cloud very specifically more than anyone I know. And I love to nerd out about very specific types of tech. I used to do a lot of documentation and write-ups on them, and I am obsessed. Yeah, I won't get you started on ad tech, martech, cloud, Miles. I don't know if people want that. So getting into really how we think about our different types of training. And again, this is going to be different for everyone, but we wanted to share how we've thought about mapping it out. So basically, here it is. So we look at it in two matrices. So we have fact-based versus perception-based, and then strategic versus tactical, right? And so you'll see that these perspective sessions kind of sit in every single bucket. And the reason for that is sometimes we'll have something like perspective of a hands-on keyboard media buyer. And that is someone who is incredibly tactical, that is executing marketing plans, but then we might also have a strategic perspective of how CMOs think about measurement, right? So it can kind of vary. And one of the things that we work really hard to do is understand really, do you need more of that tactical perspective or strategic perspective somewhere in the middle? And then also fact-based versus perception-based. So explainer trainings, right? These are the type of trainings that are like, what is, how is. These sit mostly in fact-based. We'll incorporate sometimes a little bit of perception as well, but most generally fact-based. And then when we get into competitive, we tend to have kind of facts, what's out there publicly, and then we'll also include some perception. So for instance, when we do competitive trainings on different types of buying technology, we'll have a buyer as an expert who will talk about, this is what This is what they're pitching. This is what it says on their site. This is, what they talk about in the press. This is what I see as exciting, or this is what I think works really well for them, right? So it's a combination of fact and perception. And then trends and zeitgeist, right? So there's a little bit of fact there, like here's what people are talking about, but really it's about what is happening, why is it interesting? And what's really fun about trends and zeitgeist, I mentioned I love these, is that oftentimes we'll be talking about a big trend. Someone's talking about a new piece of tech or a new way to measure things. And one of our experts will say like, "Yeah, we talked about it." And we're like, "Okay, people are writing about it, but I don't understand why it's exciting." And that's always really fun. It's a really aha moment for people because sometimes, and every industry is like this, right? Like we get excited and then we're like, "Wait, why was I excited?" So that can be really helpful too. So in terms of how, oh my gosh, stop it, Miles. No one to get fired for buying IBM. Stop it. So in terms of how we think about building trainings, I want to touch on this too. So we've thought about kind of what their needs are, what our learners' needs are. We've thought about the different types of training they may need, but there's also a component here of what we want people to get out of trainings, right? So we have kind of our standard training goals that we always think about, right? So what do we want learners to know, right? Easy enough. What do we want them to know? What do we want them to do, right? What are the outcomes that we want to measure? What do we want them to be able to do after the training? Pretty standard, right? But as I mentioned earlier, all good training is human. So the third thing we think about is how do we want learners to feel? And this is not just about the bottom part of Kirkpatrick of like, how do they feel in the training? That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is how do we want them to feel during and after? So this can be, we think about this in a lot of ways, and this will feed into how we choose experts in a second here. Do we want them to feel like, oh, this is all kind of just whatever. It's like not super real. Everybody's just freaking out about it, but it's not really happening. For instance, cookie deprecation for my nerds on the call. If you are not familiar, it was a big topic for like 5 years in our industry. And we could tell right away that there were some companies that were like, is this like a thing that I should care about or not or what? And so one of the things we might want them to feel is like, oh, it's not really a big deal, right? And so that could be a thing. Or do we want people to feel like, oh, you're not alone in this? Like it's super chaotic. Or do we want people to feel like I'm so strong, I can go get them, right? Those are all very different feelings. And so when we design content, we design with that in mind. How do we want them to feel coming out of this? That impacts the verbs we use, that impacts the images we use, it impacts how we talk about things. So I would encourage everyone on the call, if you are designing trainings, think about this. Think about how do we want people to feel, not just in session, right? That's always important. But after, when they drop off the call or when they leave the room, how do they feel? Are they pumped? Are they like, oh, it felt like a warm hug, right? Like, what is that feeling we want people to have coming out of it? So once we've considered all of this, then we get to our experts. Now, Miles, I do want to note we were at 329 experts as of this morning. When you were like, she would know the exact number, that's correct. It's 329 as of this morning. And so when we think about staffing, right? So we own at U of Digital, we build a lot of the content ourselves, but we always talk to experts about like what's working, what's not, what do you want to talk about, all those sorts of things. So we manage design, all that fun stuff, but we always, always, always get expert input. So when we are at the staffing stage, we have figured out our learner needs, we have started building sort of baseline content, and now we're thinking about who should run this training, whose input do we want, and who can deliver the best session possible. So when we get into experts, there's kind of 4 different kinds of experts. So this is more looking externally for us as we go through this. So this is kind of for everyone on the call when we think about types of experts you could choose from. So there's internal experts, right? If you are at a company and you are doing an internal training, you are probably going to look for an internal expert. We view internal experts generally great for like go to market, product, policy and legal, 100%. Everybody's different. Finance, specific applications, products, workflows, right? Like specific to the company. Internal experts are amazing, hands down. They know everything inside and out. Then partner specific. So these are what Miles was mentioning earlier. So you might go to, say, an SEM Rush, which is a search tool, and you might get training from them on SEM Rush or how search works according to SEM Rush. So they're great for platform training. They're great for in-depth technical knowledge. If you're looking for like, I want to know how to use this tool inside and out, partner specific is amazing for that. External freelance experts. So I spent some time as an external freelance expert. So I'll speak for myself on this one. So external freelance experts are if you are a company and you find someone who is an expert or a trainer in a specific area. They can be really great for hands-on keyboard, what we say like when people are actually doing things, right? That can be really helpful. We are doing things in a platform, we are doing a specific process. They're very good for specific perspectives. So I often got called in for a buyer perspective on specific tools, how I use them, what that looks like before I came to U of Digital. And narrow and deep training scope. Again, we are looking at very specific areas of expertise. And then the fourth type of expert you might consider are training companies and vendors. So when we talk about that, they're great for scale, right? So as I mentioned, we have over 300 experts in our network. They come from all different types of backgrounds: publishers, sellers, buyers, marketers, tech specialists, data specialists. It's great for scale. It's great from market and industry perspective. A lot of our experts are coming from all different perspectives. Multi-topic trainings and curricula, right? So we have a client right now that we are starting with the basics of how marketing works, and then we're doing a whole quarter on data and how all of that fits together. Then we're doing a whole quarter on tech, how data fits into tech, right? So we can do multi-topic trainings and full, as Miles mentioned, kind of 12-month curricula that is really feeding into each other because of that scale. So we're a training company. We choose experts. How do we do that? So when we determine our best expert, expertise is great, right? We are teaching a session on measurement. We are teaching a session that requires someone who has done measurement. Cool. When we think about our experts, it's not just about their expertise, right? I am going to say something slightly sassy. Miles doesn't know I was going to say this. We'll see how it goes. I think all of us have been in a training where someone knew so much. You're like, this is the smartest person I've ever met in my life. But man, was it hard to pay attention. Man, right? We've all been there. So it's not just necessarily about expertise. All of our experts have great backgrounds. They're all very smart. But we also consider other factors as well. So we think about not only the expert and their style, but also the group and their style. So first off, we think about the expert's presentation style. We're going to show some of our personas in a second here. We think about how they approach things. What is their presentation style? We also think about the group style. So what is their energy level? Are they more on camera or not? Are they more in chat or not? Are they more conversational or not? Do they have specific questions we've heard in the past that we'd like to answer in this session that require a specific expertise or knowledge level? We see that sometimes where we'll do more of a like 101 or intro level session, and we'll see there's a couple people in the call that are quite advanced. So for their next session, as an example, we'll say, okay, let's put a more advanced expert on here to help those people that are more advanced really like get their time and time to shine as well. So we think about that. Group knowledge we just talked about, right? So what level are they at? And also the expert background. And this is really important. So as I said earlier, I come from mostly the buy side. I worked with sellers. I know a lot of sellers. I'm friends with sellers, but that's not necessarily my background. And I realized that was a blind spot as I started training sellers because I was like, "Oh, you are in a totally different world. We do similar things in the same industry, but your background is totally different." And so we also think about that. Again, remember we contextualize everything. So learner energy, group knowledge, what have they gotten excited about in the past? Right? So we see some of our clients, like the second you mention an expert mentions like their perception of that that team's company, they get pumped. They're like, I want to hear all about it. That's what I want to know. So for us, we need an expert that has worked with that company in some capacity, right? So we think about all of these factors when we choose our experts. And so with that, we've started kind of putting together personas. of our presentation styles of our experts. So I want to walk you through three. We have others as well, but these are kind of, I would say, our most common ones. So our first expert persona is like an authoritative professor. So I am thinking of someone in my head right now. I'm going to use them as an example. They are very much like, this is the way it is. Like, this is what it is. This is the way it is. I can't change it. You can't change it, right? And that can be really, really helpful for some teams who just want direct clarity, right? They want to know this is what it is. This is how it works. I don't want anything else. I want to focus, right? So authoritative professors can be really helpful for some groups. And again, this comes back to how do we want people to feel, right? How do we want people to feel? And if we want people to feel like we're all good, this is a big hug, authoritative professor persona is probably not the way to go, right? So we match all of this together. Empathetic buddy is the big hug. So this is the persona that's like, we're all in this together. So oftentimes we see this with companies that are newer to digital marketing, and trust me, it is very complicated very quickly. So oftentimes we find that having someone who's more of an empathetic buddy, like, yeah, we're all in this together, it's really messy. I say on almost every one of my calls, like, we have too many TLAs, three-letter acronyms, and we use them all the time, right? It gives people space to feel safe, and it feels like a little bit of a warm hug. And then the third persona we have in our experts is pragmatic practitioner. So this is the type of person who comes off as very experienced. They know a lot, but they also acknowledge that like their way is not the only way. So this is someone who says, this is my approach, but I've also heard X or Y. And so when we think about really what are people looking for, oh, you think this is you? Everyone thinks they're a pragmatic practitioner, Miles. So when we think about these, right, we go back to what do we want people to feel and what have we seen work as well. And I'll fully admit, and we're not in the no, Shannon, we're not, no pulse. The erratic engineer, maybe. So when we get into like, how do we match these, right? We think about what do we want people to feel? And what type of persona in our expert network will work for that. And for me, I work on a lot of staffing for our experts. So I am always trying to learn more about their delivery style. I'm constantly checking in on sessions. And one of the things we do at U of Digital that I find is really helpful is we have someone from our core team observe a session for at least 20 minutes every single time. Every single time we have one person from our core team that takes notes on what they're seeing, what the vibe of the room is. Are people chatting? Are people excited? Right? We see all of that. We take notes on all of it. And then we ingest it and we figure out what works best. So the next thing, right? So we have figured out what people need. Great. We figured out how we want people to feel. Awesome. We now have a fantastic expert that's going to do all this great stuff. But how do we prep them for success? Right? Help your experts help you. Please, please, please. So before I came to U of Digital, I worked with some training companies. And I would often get like, it's going to be 30 people. They all work at this one company and they want to know about X. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I'd just be like, sent on my way. And I can tell you as a trainer, that is hard. I'm like, okay, I don't know how these people are. I don't know if they want to be here. I don't know if they like to talk. Like, I don't know anything. So, in terms of helping your experts, and again, this can be internal, this can be external, help your trainers help you. And here's how. At U of Digital, we have both an expert and a moderator on every session. So when we do prep calls with our experts and moderators, if they have not met before, we give them time to get to know each other before we launch into here's what you're doing. We give them time to build rapport. And we don't do icebreakers necessarily. We do sometimes if they're fun, but like we literally just say like tell us about yourself and like what you like doing. And it's amazing when you're just like, what do you like doing outside of work? Right? I know it sounds so basic, but the other day someone showed their new puppy. It was so exciting, right? It gives people time to build rapport before we launch into work. And again, all people are human, right? So we give people time to get to know each other before we talk about anything else. And the second thing we do is with our experts and moderators, we've let them chart their own path as a pair. And here's what I mean by that. We will say, like, here's generally how the slides are divided. Let's talk about how you want to approach them. So some of our experts like to take questions as they go. Most of our experts do. Some of our experts like to say, okay, is this going to be a talkative group? Can we hold until the end of each section? We let the moderator and the expert have those discussions. We also talk about small things like, is the expert going to have chat open while they talk? And again, that sounds really small, but the amount of trainings I have been on outside of U of Digital where someone assumes someone is looking at the chat and no one is, right? So we want to have attention to detail when we are working with our experts. And if you have a moderator or any sort of MC, you want to have that attention to detail, make sure that's covered off on, but let them chart their own path as a pair. We find that sessions go best when we let people be themselves and we let them run things what's comfortable for them to an extent. Obviously, we're not going to be like, no deck, just play music for 60 minutes, right? We're not going to do that, but we let people kind of chart their own path and how they want it to look. The third is in-session intangibles. So this is the like attention to detail that I mentioned. So I oversee our operations at U of Digital as well. And so I am obsessed with like tiny little details. So things we talk about with in-session intangibles. What is the general mood of this group? I share that every time we brief an expert. I have seen some trainings where we have groups that just do not like to talk. We just don't. They'll do any sort of activity, any sort of chat activity. They do trivia. They'll do all the activities. They're paying attention. Our numbers look great. They do not want to talk. And for anyone on this call who has run a training, the biggest fear is no one talking. You're just like, all right, well, it's silent and I must be doing poorly. So we always, always, always let our experts and moderators know, like, what is this group like? Do they chat? Do they prefer chat over coming off mute? Are they on camera? Are they not? All these sorts of things, in addition to the basics, right? Like how many people are going to be in the room, what's their background, that sort of thing. The in-session intangibles allow your expert and your moderator to chart their own path because they know what they're in for, right? And then the last piece here is the group context. So anytime we have additional context of, for instance, they've just hired a bunch of people. We just had this with a client recently where they just hired a ton of new people. And so they're having a little bit of like growing pains around that of people who've been there a while, people that are new. And that can be really helpful for your experts to know, right? So it's like, oh, if one person is asking about external stuff that has nothing to do with the company and one person is asking about just nonstop company stuff, there's a reason for that and they can contextualize their answer better. So the last piece here, we run a training. Great, we did it. Everyone's happy. Woo! Now we have to talk about what worked, what didn't, right? We always, 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 we are learning professionals. We always want to be learning. So we look at a lot of different factors. As I mentioned, we always have someone observing a session. We always have someone really like trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And I always go back and look at all of these notes and follow up with people and say like, hey, you said it seemed kind of like quiet in there. That's kind of weird for them. Did you get any other sort of like vibe or any sort of intel, that sort of thing? I'll ask our experts, I'll ask our observers, trying to get to the human part, right? Why is it the way it is? So we think about it in three key ways. So first off, what can we learn about the topic itself? So remember, we are working with all different types of clients. So sometimes we test new topics and sometimes, honestly, they're not great, right? And we've all been there. We've all been like, I'm going to test this new session. It's going to be amazing. And you run it and you're like, nope. And so that's really helpful for us to know, right? It's not just about your successes, it's about what can you learn, right? So we look at like within a topic, right? Was the topic exciting generally? But within that session, what did people get excited about? What did they not get excited about? What was a lull, right? What were the question themes? Were they around specific topics? Were they all over the map, right? And that can help us next time we develop the topic so we can anticipate like, oh, they'll probably ask about XYZ, right? The second thing is around the group, right? So what are their general likes and dislikes? And y'all, the amount of times I am so sure that doing intakes, I am 1000% confident I know what a group is going to be like. And then we run their first session and I'm like, well, I got to question my assumptions. I was wrong, right? So it's really important for us to know their general likes and dislikes and continually observe that and see what works. Also note the energy levels. We keep track of this in our project management boards. We keep track of energy level, mood level. We keep track of all of it so that when we brief people, we already have that information and we can continue to gut check if we're right. And when we talk about likes and dislikes, so for instance, great question. So for instance, like some Oh, that's a good one. So one of our clients actually is obsessed with trivia. They are hyper competitive. They love having what I call fake internet points. So we'll do trivia and we'll be like 10,000 fake internet points for you, right? And we literally we could do a 60-minute session of just trivia and I feel like they'd be pumped. I would never do that, but I feel like they'd love it. So like that's a good example. Whereas we have another client that like we put in trivia and they felt like it was a little bit too competitive. And we were like, okay, well, no more trivia. We don't want anyone to be mad, right? So like that's an example. Also, sometimes like breakout rooms. We've seen some clients that the second you start a breakout room, they're just like doing other work, right? And we all know that happens. We can't, so we're like, okay, we won't do breakout rooms anymore. We've also seen people do breakout rooms, like that's the best thing ever, more breakout rooms, right? So we try to pinpoint not only like types of activities, but also likes and dislikes in terms of how we talk about topics. So someone might do, we might do an educational explainer, and we might find that they really like metaphors. Sometimes people just love metaphors, right? So we really need to get to that piece as well. And then the third is around the expert. So again, we are always looking at our experts and looking at fit and looking at what they did, right? So was the knowledge on par with the group? Was the mood on par with the group? Was the background a good fit, right? As we talked about. Somebody might be on the sales side now, but they come from a buying background. Was that helpful? Was that good? And of course, what can we carry forward? So what can we apply to further sessions of that specific topic, even if it's not with that client? But then also, what can we carry forward with our clients themselves? And what can we carry forward with our experts, right? When we give them feedback, when they work on another session, what worked last time, what didn't, that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, as I started with, I will end with great training is human. Our goal as learning practitioners and learning experts is to bring out the human in everyone, whether that be our SMEs, whether that be our learners, whether that be other learning professionals. The magic really happens when we find the human element of everything across the board. So, Miles, I'm plugging it again for you. Plug AI Accelerator. It is great. Feel free to email Miles or myself if you're interested, want to learn more. Email me if you want to nerd out about learning stuff. As I said, I love to. Our emails are here. I'm Veronica.Ripson. He's Miles at uf.digital. As Shannon mentioned in chat, please share your feedback. Y'all, you're learning professionals. You know, we live for feedback. Please let us know what worked, what didn't. And as Shannon mentioned in chat as well, Shannon, you want to plug this as we close out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I love the theme, the narrative, because you were talking a lot about measurement for marketing. Next month, we're going to be talking about measurement for education. So we have the CEO of Kirkpatrick Partners coming to talk through the Kirkpatrick model of measurement. So how are we taking, that engagement level, learner feedback, engagement level data, and then bringing that all the way up to business impact metrics. And we'll be walking through that next month. But Miles, thank you so much for your time, for walking us through this. I took a lot of notes. I'm confident other people did too. Please reach out to these two. They're a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and hope to see you all soon. Yeah, there's their contact info, and find them on LinkedIn too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
come
yeah.
hang out. We
Thank you,
can all
everybody.
nerd out. Thanks so much, y'all. Really appreciate the time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bye
Thank
for
you,
now.
Shannon.
Bye, everybody.